Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Carrie Oderman with UATV. From the 2nd to the 4th of July, the 3rd International Ukraine Reform Conference took place in Toronto, Canada. More than 800 representatives of the EU, NATO, and G7 countries came to participate, discuss the achievements of economic and social reforms in Ukraine, and set new goals for the future. Taking place between presidential and parliamentary elections, this conference came at an opportune time to reinforce the foundations of democratic reform. To talk about the outcome of this event, we welcome to our studio today Anton Yaschenko, Executive Director of the Reforms Delivery Office, Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Your title. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about exactly what your role is in the government.
Our organization, Reforms Delivery Office, it's an advisory body to the Cabinet of Ministers, to the government, and our job is to support the government with reforms implementation on the different stages of reforms, like proper planning, coordination, facilitation of reforms, and of course monitoring and reporting to the Prime Minister and to the government.
Now, this conference that took place in Toronto on the 2nd through the 4th of July, how is this tied to your task?
This reform conference is a flagship project to our team, and it's important to mention the context, why it was launched. If we will read or look at international media in capitals, we will see negative narrative about Ukraine, about war, crisis, corruption, and everything like this. Of course, we faced such challenges in Ukraine, but we have a lot of good things happening in Ukraine, a lot of reforms, and that's why bringing this positive narrative outside Ukraine is extremely important, because without this positive information to attract foreign direct investment, it's very hard. And of course, then our government or president or parliament, when they cooperate with their international partners, they of course face this negative news, and it's a bit harder to them to work with their partners.
You had mentioned economics. Now, the difference between this convention and the past two is that economic developments was really underscored. Will you tell us more about that decision and how that was done?
I think this year organization of the conference was challenging because of time between elections, and that's why it was extremely important. Because new president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, was able to share his vision with international community about economic development and social development of the country. And also, together with so-called ministerial day, when governments are main participants of the conference, we had 2 days of Ukraine House, which was more inclusive. It was open to public, and it was organized by Ukraine Invest. It's a governmental agency to investments. It's governmental agency to attract foreign investments, and there we were able to showcase not only business opportunities or investment opportunities of Ukraine, but also to showcase fashion industry of Ukraine or tourism, just to give fresh vision and fresh description of Ukraine, and to change this myth of failed state. And to change a lot of skepticism about Ukraine. And I think we were successful. We have seen more than 30 international delegations there, more than 800 participants in total. And also we analyzed international media, more than 100 media appearances in printed media and TV. And with a very positive narrative.
Let's talk about how you reached out to these potential businesses and people interested in investing in Ukraine. Well, what interests me is what were some of their attitudes and how you changed their attitudes through this event. Do you have any concrete examples?
I believe that concrete examples and deals we will see only in upcoming months after the event. But what was interesting, that initially we thought that we will organize the meeting with the president and the Canadian businesses, maybe 30 or 50 representatives of Canadian businesses. But together with Economic Club of Canada, we had more than 500 participants in the room where President Volodymyr Zelensky shared his vision and economic and investment opportunities in Ukraine. And also he named current Canadian investors to Ukraine. And it was very important to see how people who do not invest now, they see their partners from the club, and we believe that this will bring a new dynamic and will bring new investments to Ukraine.
Okay, that sounds very positive, but we have to circle back around to the initial basis for the conference, and it was reforms. People are not going to want to be doing business in the Ukraine unless they know it's safe. There's an educated workforce. There's health care. What has the Ukraine done since the first conference 3 years ago to improve the situation with the reforms?
I think I will start from the concept of this event. Of course, Ukraine do a lot of bilateral meetings and participate, and the government representative participates in a number of events. But this conference is unique because it gives an opportunity to gather dozens of international delegations on a very high level, on a level of ministers of foreign affairs or deputy ministers of foreign affairs, but also heads of international financial organizations like IMF, World Bank or EBRD, and to talk for the whole day, not 1 or 2 hours, but for the whole day, to focus attention of this audience on Ukraine and to discuss sometimes in details not only successes but also challenges which Ukrainian government faces, and how Ukraine, together with international partners, can overcome these challenges.
Some might say it was no coincidence that the conference was held in Toronto. Canada invests about 80 million, or has invested about 800 million, pardon me, through different aid packages. Was there a sense of Ukraine bringing their report card home to Canada to show them what they've accomplished?
No, I think the aim of the conference is not to showcase reports or to say what was done and what not. It's to discuss together with international partners the problems and how we can move forward together, to showcase that Ukraine is a reliable partner and you can do business and investments in Ukraine. And of course, this year timing was very challenging, and we are very thankful to Canadian government and to Foreign Minister Chrystia Freeland, who was very, very active in organization of this conference in a very special moment, not only outside Ukraine, but also inside Ukraine between elections.
What are some of the key points that you would like our viewers to know about this conference? If I was going to run into you and say, tell me about the 5 things you brought back from the exchange in Canada, or 3 things, what would you tell me?
I think what I mentioned to myself, that in London, the government of Ukraine presented a 3 years plan. In Copenhagen, we discussed preliminary results and status of ongoing reforms. But this year, we were able to discuss results of this process, and I was very surprised with the positive narrative in official statements of international delegations and during conversations in panels by speakers, but also outside formal stage of the conference.
So more of an informal exchange.
Yes, we had dozens of bilateral meetings, and I think this positive narrative was also heard not only by international community but also by Ukrainian government, civil society and experts who were also there. It was because you would agree with me that in Ukraine sometimes we are we have a lot of negative. We want to have very fast and dramatic change in all spheres of life tomorrow, maybe even today. But sometimes it takes time. And it's very useful to hear from our international partners, to hear recognition of what was done. For example, Chrystia Freeland mentioned in her speech, in her statement, that during 5 years of reforms, it was done more than more than previous 25 years. So to hear that from outsider, it's very valuable.
Now, the Germans and the French and the EU are especially interested in the reform and the decentralization. With Canada's investments, could you let our viewers know what their concentration is in Ukraine? Pardon me.
I think in general, decentralization and what was mentioned by Mr. Milbrandt, who is special envoy of German government, that decentralization is important not only in terms of economic impact in regions, but it's also very important as a resilient component to face Russian aggression.
My final question might be a difficult one for you to answer. In your position, what are some of the biggest challenges of your job getting this reform done?
I think that the biggest challenge is coalition or lack of coalition between the government and the parliament. I think, and my hope is that we will have new parliament, efficient parliament, who will constructively work with the new government, and it will allow to speed up current achievements and reforms and to start new ones.
Well, we wish you the best of luck. That was Anton Yaschenko, Executive Director of the Reforms Delivery Office, Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. Thank you for watching the program. Stay tuned for more with UATV.